doing that you can talk about?
Oh, a lot of stuff.
Cool. All right.
Essentially, I haven't really been watching much of anime because, well, yeah, it gets a little bit annoying having to get rid of
Well, I've
the
only been
subtitles.
watching Dragon Ball Z, so
Eh, okay, there we go.
so you're all
I
good.
guess one of the things I have been watching is just going back to some of the movie reviews on YouTube that I've been watching.
Oh yeah.
Like the infamous Nostalgia Critic, if you know about him.
Yeah, I only have one guy I like on YouTube, to be honest.
Well, I just like looking at Nostalgia Critic because he's just yeah,
Yeah.
he does put a comedic
Oh,
spin to his
okay.
reviews, and he does make it sound all
We're
yeah.
gonna start now. I'm gonna start now.
Okay, cool.
All right, you good to go? You are listening to Insert Cast. Oh shit, sorry. Wrong intro for the wrong episode. Jesus, I need two podcasts. I'd have to try and remember which one's which. You are listening to Alternating with Eric. Shit, I'm gonna have to look up what episode number we're up to. Eric, do you remember what episode number we're up to? Oh, wait,
Um,
17, aren't we? We're up to 17, I'm pretty sure.
think so,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. You are listening to Alternating with Eric. Shit. You are listening to Alternating with Eric, episode 17. Eric, how you doing?
No, I've been doing well. Mostly been working from home, but whenever I could find the time, I've, I've watched, I've mostly just been reading, through different types of manga whenever I could.
Hmm.
And I've been looking at a few silly ones. I've been looking at a few, serious ones, but all in all, just a different assortment, even ones that have, only recently come out and yeah, or ones that have had recent updates. But I've started to collect my own little list of mangas that are that I have come up to, but haven't been what is it? I haven't actually been updated yet. A few of them are horrors, but one of them called The Fake Detective. It's an interesting one because it's pretty much Detective Conan, both ghosts. It's not as long. Obviously, it's quite recent, not as long as Detective Conan,
Hmm.
but the whole scenery and the entire. I guess the whole concept's the same. You got a genius detective who can solve things just by kind of looking around and kind of understanding the situation just from the offset from say trying to understand when they could find the list of students at a school just by looking outside and seeing what the environment is
Hmm.
like and
Hmm.
going from that.
Hmm.
It's a pretty interesting one. What's another one I looked at? A silly one I looked at. It's called "May I Ask for One Single Thing?" But yeah. And yeah, the other manga was May I Ask for One Single Thing, which is essentially about a female protagonist who, goes around with a single mindset of just punching people in the face. It's very much entertaining, and I'm rather saddened by the fact that it's only got a few chapters. But but the one thing I think it'll put off from people, I don't know, maybe it might put you off, Connor. It's a reverse harem type situation. So it's
I've
got
read Fruits Basket.
oh, okay. Well, I don't know if Fruits Basket counts. There, but this is like a legit reverse harem. There's a whole bunch of guys all interested in just one woman. which is, yeah, I think that's the angle they're going for with this one. But the main entertainment part is just about the main character, essentially having the mindset of solving her problems by punching people in the face, and just having this sort of just having this whole demeanor of anything can be solved with quite a bit of violence, which is really good. Which is really good, especially since the main character is of royalty, where whenever you look at anything royalty related, it doesn't always end up as the main character wanting to punch people in the face to solve all their problems. But with this character, it is an entertaining. It is slightly entertaining. I'm hoping to read through it, see if it gets even more interesting. But hopefully, this whole mindset's not going to be, on a linear path to the point where it gets boring. But essentially, yeah, that's what I've been doing. And as for gaming, I've been looking at, I've been playing online multiplayer gaming, including War Thunder, which is something I really like because in it I get to fly around in a plane, drive around in a tank, and then also go in a boat. But the boat part is not often done, so I just stick to planes and tanks. Obviously stuff I can fly and drive from as early as the 1930s all the way to the 1990s. And it is a lot of fun, although there's a few things you need to pay credits for and use real money to buy. But I'm pretty happy with what I have so far, especially since I unlocked an Italian car to drive around in and shoot people. Yes, it is as hilarious as it sounds. Yeah, but I mean, otherwise, that's been pretty much me for entertainment. And what about yourself, Connor?
Well, so I went yesterday. I went and did a jam session with a friend of mine, and they're a little bit further out, so I had to have like some stuff for me to listen to on the train, and then I forgot my headphones, so I had to have some stuff for me to read on the train. So so I pulled out my my manga reading stuff on my phone, pulled out my internet, and I looked at a bunch of titles, and some of them we might review on the podcast. I'm considering it. I had read one of these ones sort of before, but I hadn't read it again, so I went back and read a bit of a manga called Real. It's a basketball manga that involves one of the characters, a couple of the characters are in wheelchairs, and one of the characters I think is gonna be in a wheelchair. And I think it's written by the guy who did Vagabond and maybe something else. I can't remember the other title. I think maybe Slam Dunk. It would make sense since it's basketball. Although it doesn't look exactly like the Slam Dunk art. But yeah, I read that. I finally, as we know, I read all of the Parasite manga. I reviewed it on here, and I had seen a couple episodes. Well, I'd seen clips, but I actually sat down and watched a couple episodes on Netflix of Parasite: The Maximum, and it wasn't too bad. I watched the dub of it. The dub was okay. The sub was okay. The humor, it's funny because I know everything that's going to happen since I've read the manga, and they don't really change anything. Is it that predictable?
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
okay.
So, they don't change anything other than the time period that it's set in. So it's weird because it's like you're watching and you're like, oh yeah, I remember this chapter, but I remember it looking so different, or I remember seeing this chapter, but he didn't have the internet in this chapter, so he's not reading a book. Instead, he's like looking it up online. And then there's still stuff that's kept in there, like the little alien thing on his hand still actually reads books, which I was surprised to see. But then later on, he just goes on the internet and searches stuff, which wasn't possible in the previous manga that was like 89 to 95 or something. So sort of set in the 80s and 90s. But yeah, no, I enjoyed watching a bit of that. And then since I did that, I said, well, I thought I wouldn't mind if we actually, if I could see if there was any other good stuff he had written, and maybe we could review something else that he's written on the podcast. So I looked up his name, looked up what he had written. I read about 3 or 4 of his titles, and I'd say maybe one of them we're going to pick to read. There's a thing called Neo Devilman. And I didn't want us to review Devilman Crybaby or even the 70s Devilman, because I feel like a bunch of people have done that. There's multiple good reviews you can hear on that, and it's a pretty well-known title. It's easy to find and that sort of thing. I could talk about it just in general, but I didn't want to do a full review on both of those shows. So what I'm thinking instead is this Neo Devilman thing kind of interests me, this manga, because one of the stories is written by the guy who wrote Parasite, and I believe there's a couple other famous manga authors in there. It's all these different manga artists and writers putting their own spin on the Devilman storyline. The only thing I would say, Eric, you've seen some Devilman, eh?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, because you'd have to watch a decent chunk to know at least what's going on, what they're putting a spin on. Like,
Is it like their own little short stories or fan theories about what's going on?
Okay,
or?
So do you know about the part where there's where one of the characters goes live on TV and talks about the other character? Do you know about that part in the manga or the anime?
I think I do remember.
Okay. So you remember in that he basically, spoilers, exposes one of the characters of being a demon, and then basically,
yep.
and then
okay.
and then everybody thinks there's demons around and all this, and there's an OVA. Actually, I'd be tempted to review that OVA. There's an OVA called Amon Demon something, really good. Hard to find a decent, like, the subs aren't great on the release I have. I think I just watched it on YouTube, or I had a YouTube version or something of it. It's not a great version in terms of translation, I think, but that's a good version of that story. And in that, we just see Miki and her brother. I think it's Toro or Toro. It's some name with T. Her and her little brother are finding out about this, and we see basically their point of view, and we see all these protesters and all this other stuff go on. This version, though, this story, I'm not going to get into it too much because I want to review it, but it basically goes from showing what other people are doing while this thing is going on, and I thought that was interesting. And that's what a lot of the stories are like. They don't necessarily always show Akira Fudo or any of the other characters. It's more focused on like new side characters that are within the universe of Devilman, that are created by other creators, and I thought that was interesting. So we may or may not review that, maybe.
Oh, it sounds like a first for me. Where you get an anime with a massive event that the public would know would know about, or the public finds out about, and there you have a whole bunch of other people kind of going off and saying, okay, so there's a whole bunch of people who know about it, but let's create separate stories for each. Let's create our own spin on what they feel like, what they think, what they would do. I guess in a way it just kind of creates an almost butterfly effect from that single action, and then we get to see, okay, so that single action creates a whole bunch of other different actions, and these affect these people in the positive, negative, or doesn't affect them at all kind of way. Although I would think devil worshippers are, or people who call themselves Satanists would probably go, yes, our time has come. Lead on, brothers.
You'd be maybe not my place to talk about it here, because it's not. I could do a full podcast on it, but I've actually read up on some things about Satanism, and they're actually, depending on which time period we're talking about, they're actually pretty chill in certain. When you read about certain sects of them, they're mostly just anti-religious people. They just don't like Christians.
There's there are some like the Satanic Church and the Satanists. There's that less obvious side to them where they, as you've said, they're anti-religious. They're mostly people who pursue knowledge. But because of that title, the Satanist attached to them, that's kind of the bad vibes they get.
Yeah.
Especially with the association over 1,000 years, maybe more. I can't exactly remember when the concept of Satan came up in religious doctrine, but because it's had all these years of bad PR to it. I guess that's the best way to say it. The attached name does kind of take these chilled out people who gather under that sort of title, make them look pretty bad. And there are
Yeah.
they do exist, especially when you see a few of them getting interviewed in America, where the interviewers are like, "So did you know that your name is, associated with Satanists?" It's like, yeah, but we're not those crazy Satanists. We just like to pursue knowledge or,
I don't know.
help others understand the view
This
of
is
the
a
world.
very complicated and could be very political subject, so
It definitely
I'm gonna
is.
steer away a little bit from it. But as I said, we
No,
may
steamroll into it. Steamroll into it.
we may or may not review Neo Devilman at some point. I'm considering it because I like the story, and Devilman is just it's one of my favorite Go Nagai works, even though I don't necessarily like every part of it, but there's little parts and bits and pieces that I like, and it's influenced some really cool stuff. I think probably the most, maybe not the most well-known, but the most obvious reference that you could see is anybody that's played Tekken. Well, you could say Devil Jin, but I think probably the even most obvious one is bloody Devil Kazuya, which is literally just looks like a version of Devilman, but hey, he's purple.
I guess that's one way of not getting
And then
sued.
there's things like the eclipse in Berserk is very similar to a certain moment in Devilman, and a little bit in some of Go Nagai's other works like Violence Jack and that sort of thing. So, but
Oh dear. Yeah.
But today, but before we get into review, I guess I could also talk about the fact that I've been watching lots of Dragon Ball Super. Lots and lots. I'm finally catching up on it because I just put it off for ages and ages. I was waiting for the dub to come all out because, sorry, I don't really like the Japanese that much, to be honest. I know it's a cultural thing with the voice and stuff. It just doesn't work for me. I like Goku's English voice a lot more. I've been watching, so I've been catching up on that. I'm on the final arc, and I think I've got 20 episodes to go, maybe. Like, every time I look at it, I keep on thinking, like, oh, I've only got this many more episodes to go. And then I look at it again, I'm like, nah, I got more than I expected. And it drags out quite a bit, this big universal tournament arc thing that I'm on. But it's a cool arc. There are some cool moments. There's one or two episodes I'll admit I skipped just because it dragged out a bit. And yeah, I don't know. I'm feeling like a kid again watching Dragon Ball Z week to week. It's like that all over again for me watching Dragon Ball Super. So.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying that. So, let's talk about what we are reviewing today. I picked something kind of different, a bit experimental, you could say, a bit surreal,
That's one way of putting it.
It's different. I wanted our theme this week to be something sort of psychological and out there, and I wanted to talk about this show because along with this and Boogie Pop Phantom, these were two anime shows that really piqued. Well, it was this and Silent Hill as well that really piqued my interest in using sound design in film and video games, and how effective it can be to set mood and tension and that sort of thing. And that's sort of why I wanted to talk about this, because the story is interesting and there's lots of interesting things in the visuals too, but the sound design in both of these shows, both this show and another show called Boogie Pop Phantom, are just so interesting, and really, I'll get into it as we get into the review. But it was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it today. So, Eric, what did you think of our show today, Surreal Experiments Lain? I think I'm pronouncing
Well,
that right.
I think I've mentioned this to you already, but I have watched this show before. So I first watched it with my cousin who introduced it to me, and my cousin something I didn't know. My cousin really liked the more surreal and more artsy style
Mm,
animes.
mm-hmm.
So when he introduced me to this, I was like, I'm not surprised you like this. And what surprised me though is that I did like it. I do remember watching it years back. I can't remember everything that's happened because, over the years
Sorry,
I've watched other things.
did you watch it all the way through, or just a couple episodes?
Ooh, that's the thing though. I couldn't remember. I do remember the first episode because of how trippy it was,
Hmm.
but I couldn't remember everything else. I'm not sure why. But I mean, with this, I still watched the first episode, and I remember why I liked it. Like, I guess the first introduction to it, where we get some random girl committing suicide. That's not the thing that really grasped me. I just thought, oh dear, is this going to be another sad sort of suicidal focused what is it? More like society focused type anime. But instead, kind of going from the opening title, going on to the basically the life of the main character. I can't remember her name.
Lain.
Yeah, Lain, that's the one. Oh, that's right. It's
She's
in
in
the
the
title.
title.
Oops. Yeah, it's in the title. Oops. Um, I just thought this is trippy as
Mm,
hell.
mm,
Like I really like this opening because I don't see this many types of openings that often.
mm,
It's like they're
mm,
using real world imagery in addition to what is it animation,
mm.
like yeah, like literally animation pictures. So it does create this sort of it does create this kind of strange combination,
Mm.
but at the same time, it literally is a pretty trippy thing to watch. And
It's a
then
nice song too. They've got like a '90s sort of
oh, definitely,
acoustic ballad,
yeah.
kind of an Alanis Morissette sort of thing,
Mm.
going on. And it does. You brought up the visuals. The opening actually kind of gives me like a '90s cartoon sort of image feel to it. Yeah, it just has that sort of feel to it. Yeah.
Oh, it definitely does. Especially if you've got one single character kind of walking amongst what you feel are abandoned buildings.
Mm.
It's kind of just looking at that one part of the opening. Where the main character does kind of walk, across a bridge and into a building. Everything just kind of feels empty
Mm-hmm.
and huge and massive, and it kind of makes you. It does already suck you in just that little part. I do remember that little part. Watching the first episode, just how well the opening kind of sucked me into this whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I really liked it. And as simple as that is, it does sort of set the tone for the episode at least.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess after that ends, we do get the introduction to the main character and essentially what looks like for the first half of the episode just a normal life of a teenage schoolgirl. Okay, nothing too interesting, nothing too out of the ordinary. You don't get suckered into anything at the moment, immediately on the from the very beginning. But you do get to see that the main character is a bit off. I mean, not in a shonenish type of way. Nothing.
Uh, I would say she's just a
It's
very shy, timid girl, and what we,
true, but
yeah, I
it
think what,
seems to be a bit more. There seems to be a bit more subtlety to what's so different about the main
mm,
character. I
mm,
think. You do get to the strangest part, I guess. From the conversation she has with her classmates, is that
mm-hmm,
she's not really good with technology, which is a bit strange. It's like,
mm.
really? You're not good with technology? Why is that? Like, okay, so but not to say that I wasn't.
No.
This is one of the things I can relate to the main character. Probably around when I was even back in college, I wasn't that good with technology. Okay,
Mm,
so I've had to kind of figure some things out for myself. But kind of to see even her not bothering to check her emails every day was a bit strange as well.
Mm.
Well, but I guess not everyone checks their emails every day. Yeah, I mean even the conversation she has, like, and even the ignorance she has over her classmates, especially one of the people that died,
Mm.
and the fact that she probably hasn't been listening to her teacher announce it, apparently,
Mm.
does kind of does indicate a sort of, I guess, what is it? Kind of how she's kind of cut off from the world
Mm.
in some way, shape, or form. It's
I,
like,
yeah, I
yeah,
think that's a good way to put it. I think I would describe her as being, she's a bit shy, she's a bit timid, she's a bit, I don't want to use this word because it's a bit, yeah, she's a bit spacey, you could say.
mm,
And I don't mean the actor. I mean she's literally like, yeah, a bit ditzy. She seems like she might. I would guess maybe she's just a bit like maybe a bit ADHD or something. She can't focus
mm,
sometimes. That's
yeah,
what I got from her. She just sort of daydreams a bit. I can be a bit like that sometimes as well, I
yeah,
find. And what I find interesting about this show, and you've sort of briefly talked about it and sort of touched on it, she's not really in the what we would really in this we'd call the cyber world, because it's really what's interesting about this is the whole internet and stuff. It's not just treated as like just something people go on occasionally. It's treated like, and it's very interesting because it's sort of predicted something that would eventually become of the internet, where people would sort of have separate personalities and separate be like completely different people online, and be almost like just a whole new person. And that's kind of what you get with the show. She starts off very timid, and she's kind of that's who she is. She's a bit shy, she's a bit timid, but then once she's on the internet, she's like a whole different person. She's a lot more confident, and there seems to be this really different side of her that's starting to come out. That's as she gets more and more infested, maybe would be the word I'd say, but more engrossed in sort of the cyber world, and building up her technology and all that sort of thing.
mm, definitely, yeah, definitely. And it is something I thought I'd see as a contrast between her and her parents. I mean, with a mother, I didn't pay too much attention to that. It doesn't seem like the mother's that emotionally invested in with her daughter.
Mm.
I might be wrong, but that's the way I saw it. But with a father seems to be, what is it, like an IT technician or something? From the number of computers I saw him have, he seems to be in the world of his own. Like, he seems to,
Mm.
really invest himself into his, I guess, his job if it involves computers. And yeah, just kind of looking at the way he sets things up, the way he works with things, and even that creepy laugh he had when he did something on the computers, that was just
Mm.
it was just it was a bit of a contrast to the main character, because the main character being a bit not being tech savvy, and then there's a dad who's apparently managed to plug up 8 computers together and do something interesting on it. Kind of makes, yeah, it does solidify how strange the character is,
Yeah.
considering she's grown up around a father
Mm-hmm.
who's,
Mm-hmm.
that invested in technology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I guess in a way, the way her father is invested in it, I guess it's one of those routes the main character's taken, instead of trying to earn some kind of affection, or some kind of get some kind of attention from her dad by investing herself in the same way he is. She seems to have what is it? I guess taking herself away from it.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't want to be involved in it, because she might think, "Oh man, this doesn't look good." He seems to be so invested in it. He seems to be ignoring everything else and everybody else.
Do you think this show definitely has an underlining message? It's definitely a show that's not just straightforward. This is the plot. This is what's going on. We've sort of briefly mentioned the plot in what you could say for the first episode, and it's not exactly not the plot. As I've mentioned, it is sort of about a girl who gets more invested in the cyber world. That's the easiest way to put it. But there's a lot of other stuff going on within that.
Hmm.
But what do you only watched the first episode again? You didn't watch
Yeah.
any more from then. Did
No,
you
I've
just
just
in the first episode? What would you gather? Like, what do you think that the underlining message of maybe this show is? I have a brief idea just from what I
I
can
mean
remember watching the show quite through.
from the ending scene of the first episode, it's kind of almost reminded me of the, I guess, a persona type setting.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the same way, but more in a, more in a way where the real world that people can see, those who don't have their faces in their
Mm-hmm.
phones or computers,
Mm-hmm.
that is a real world one whole bunch of people can see, and then everyone else who seems to be more invested in a screen seems to see another world, a world where they like to pay more attention to. um, so I mean, just watching from the first episode, it seems to me that these two worlds exist, and if dying in the real world takes you to this other world where you can do a whole other bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's what I got from the ending of the first episode,
Yeah.
because we do get to see the sorry do get to see the girl from the beginning who committed suicide end up there. So it kind
Mm-hmm.
of makes me think this is another world created for everyone who's died in a situation
Mm-hmm.
involving, technology ends
Yeah.
up there. Um, although it does,
Mm.
though I'm a bit skeptical about my theory on that, considering all
So
the spiritual mumbo
yeah.
jumbo that
So
happens.
I didn't watch all the episodes again. I just watched the first episode, but I could remember certain chunks of some of the episodes, and I could vaguely remember how it ended and things like that. It's been a while since I saw the show. I watched this back to back with Boogie Pop Phantom back in the day. And this show, the thing I got from watching this that I definitely picked up on is it kind of reminded me of the themes of maybe something like Paranoia Agent, where I think it's reality versus fiction, like what we think, like well, you could say it as what we think is there but isn't there. I think Paranoia Agent does that a bit, but this show I think is more covering the topic of what world do we feel most comfortable in? What world do we actually live in? Is it healthy if we live more in our cyber world and or not? I think what the dad shows is maybe an unhealthy version of that, and then we see Lain, and I'm not really too sure if he's actually going for a negative image of being too in touch with technology. It might be because I know the guy who wrote this was a guy called Chiaki J. Konaka, who also wrote the second half of The Big O, and also the Hellsing anime, not the Hellsing Ultimate one, but the one before that, which had a slightly different ending and had some different parts in it because they had to rewrite some stuff since the manga wasn't all the way out yet. And then he also, I believe, I'm just trying to remember here. He also, just give me one sec. Chiaki J. Konaka, I've got it right here. He also, yeah, he worked on just the Big O and sorry, those are the only two I can think of. He's just worked on a number of different stuff, but he's always got a bit of. Some people would say he gets a bit confusing and can get a bit pretentious, but I think he always does have a bit of a message, and he just wants to, I think, try a bunch of different things out. And sometimes I think it works, sometimes it doesn't. I didn't love the ending to Hellsing, but I actually don't mind the ending to Big O, and I don't mind the ending to this. Just for me, I'd be very curious to know if he has a negative perspective on getting too much into technology or a positive perspective. I'm not entirely sure if it's 100% negative. I mean, it could be because there are moments of this anime that are meant to be scary, or I think are meant to be a little bit thrilling or a little bit uncomfortable. So that could be the bent that he's trying to take with this show.
Hmm.
What do you think, Eric? Just from what you've seen.
Um, Honestly, just from the first episode, I can't say I can't really say I would get a good understanding of the shows. Like hell, I wouldn't even say that I've got the dad, the mom and the dad
Mm.
down as being the characters that first hand, the first impression is the first impression. Like maybe the mother does have her own circumstances for why she seems to be apathetic, and maybe the dad has his
Yeah,
own reasons for why he's
I
being that way.
to be
But
honest, when you brought up the mother, when I watched the first episode, I thought I don't even remember her at all. To be honest, because I
yeah,
think
and that's the thing. That's
I
the thing.
think
I
she's
didn't remember
barely
her.
in any of
Yeah,
the other episodes.
I barely remember her because of how little she's in this, but I remember the dad, especially from the
Mm,
first
mm-hmm,
episode,
mm-hmm,
because of how much of an impression he's left. And that's the one thing, and that's the one thing I'd want to, see again. I don't
mm.
completely remember the what happens in the series. I would like to see, how at least the dad develops, because with the impression we
Well,
got
I
of the dad,
yeah.
yeah, I just want to see, how
Mm,
that develops, because when we get the impression of him, he seems to be someone who's stuck in his own world,
mm-hmm.
and seems to have his own fun there, if we judge him by the creepy laugh we get. Because how did that laugh go again? That
Oh,
made me sound pretty weird, but essentially
you
the idea is the same.
you just digitally
Um,
like almost cut out, Eric. You went uh, uh, uh.
okay.
It's kind of funny with
Well,
this
I
show
won't.
going on. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's well. What's interesting is I remember the sister more in the show because she has at least 2 episodes, I think, where we get to see. Well, I don't want to spoil it. She has a pretty big emotional moment in the show, and yeah, like you get to see that happen to her, and it's weird because it almost kind of comes out of nowhere. So yeah, that's one interesting thing of watching the show. So one thing I definitely want to touch on, because the main reason I wanted to recommend this to Eric and just to talk about this is the sound design and the music. The music was done by a guy called Reichi Nakaido, and his music, at least in the first episode, is not as prevalent as some of the others. You hear a bit more music in some of the other episodes. It's really one thing that people, I think, really that's really underrated in people who do music and stuff who decide where to place music, when it's going to come in, what type of music's going to be under the scene. One thing people take for granted is, and don't appreciate enough, is the use of silence a lot in film and television and how effective it can be. And when I watched Lain for the first time, I barely remembered actually a lot of the actual music and stuff when I was watching this episode. And I thought, wait a second, I remember a couple tunes and stuff every now and then, but this show has it has music definitely in a couple parts, but it actually has a lot of just long moments of silence with a long, I think it's about 60 hertz power cable buzz that's just underneath the scene, that's just buzzing there, and it's sometimes used to set. Sometimes it's weird. It can make you feel both kind of calm and at the same time a little bit uneasy, and it can kind of be used to both build up tension in the scene and just to sort of I don't know, calm the viewer down for something that's gonna happen later on. But that was one thing I definitely remembered and took from watching this show. And the sound design that's actually being used in the show was done by two guys, Akira Takemoto and Koji Kutsumatsu, and they just do a great job with a lot of just the I think they use a bit of a couple flanges and phases and different sort of
Hmm.
ways of modulating the voice and stuff. I know I was reading up on this. They use a program called Whisper, that's an Apple program to make some of those title cards sort of episode sort of things we hear at the start. Not the present day, present time, not that one. There's little. As the episode starts, we get the actual title of the episode, and rather than just a straight narrator, we get this voice that's kind of like layered. It's kind of this whispered, very fast, quick. Sounds like maybe there's almost a bit of reverse reverb or something like that on this. So there's just a lot of great use of sound design, or like taking all the voices in the background and kind of making them very muffled, kind of giving an uneasy tone to the scene. There's a lot of really interesting and a lot of experimental choices with the sound design that just make the show really artistic and really unique, and stand out for me personally. And this was also something I'd noticed of Boogie Pop. That's definitely in both of these shows, which I just really enjoyed. So I wanted to point out, the music and the sound design just was, in my opinion, pretty good. I didn't notice any. For me, there wasn't really any problems, because I thought, for the trippy visuals and stuff that were sometimes on the screen, the sound really emphasized it. And sometimes I thought the one of the main cons I have with the show is the art. I don't mind the art. The art is done by, I think, a guy called Yoshitoshi Abe, who did Last Exile and a bunch of other stuff. Not a bad artist, but he has a bit of a crude art style. And from what I know, he doesn't use a ruler and that sort of thing. He just straight up draws stuff. That's why sometimes it can look a little bit off. And in this show, it's really good, the animation, but you can tell it's maybe a little low budget in a couple places. They're not trying to 100% make the characters look like on-model, perfect-looking characters with all the features detailed and all that sort of thing. They're not afraid for them to look a bit crude. And I think if the sound design and stuff wasn't there to really add to some of those scenes, I think some of these scenes would kind of fall flat. If you took all the sound and the music out, I don't think it would work in a couple places, because I just think it really adds something to it. It just really is just so interesting to me. Yeah, I could talk about this for hours, as Eric can probably tell. I did a degree, so this is my expertise. But yeah, this was one of the, as I said, this was one of the main shows that got me interested in sound design and how it can be used. But yeah, Eric, why don't we get into some pros and cons? I've talked about the sound design. I've talked about the art. What were some things you liked within this show?
Well, the same as you. I definitely like I like more the art style than the than the music. Because I really liked looking at how things were drawn and how things looked. And even though things were a bit blurry at times, I thought that was just part of the. I think that just added to the whole setting of the anime, the whole mystery of it all. Like because you don't exactly know what's happening. Nothing seems obvious enough. Nothing seems, clear cut about what the main character is going to be involved in. You begin with basically a tragedy, of a suicide, but that could mean any number of things. But I think that is quite it's enough to kind of draw you in. It's a subject that everyone knows about, and some people would like to avoid, but at the same time, in a series, in some series, it could draw people in to try and understand what's exactly going on.
Wait.
And yeah, kind of continuing on with this, I really did get drawn into the opening. That was probably my favorite part of the first episode, the opening, because of how trippy it looked. And then even the different cutaways in between the episode, where you have this rainbow background and these little messages popping up, kind of makes you think.
Just gonna ask, what did you think of this is interesting. It's not a silent film, but it uses silent film like trippy title cards to basically do what happens in a silent film, where the characters you don't hear them talk, but like words will come up on the screen and basically say what they're saying. Except when I watched it, did you think they were actually saying it aloud, or that they were saying it in their head? Because that's what I was always asking when I saw that.
I honestly have no idea who would have been saying that. Like, it could have been the main character, it could have been a narrator, it could have been, I don't know, the spirit of the dead girl from the very beginning. Anyone or anything could have been saying these title cards, but it did set the tone for a bit of the mystery of the mystery of this whole not just the episode, but I guess the series, because it kind of makes you think, how do these little messages associate themselves? Like, who's, as you said, who's actually saying them, and also what does it mean, and why is there such a colorful background when in comparison everything else looks a bit more,
Bit bleak,
I
to be
guess,
honest.
yeah, bleak, while everything else looked bleak. Like from the opening title of, a little bit of the bleakness you see in the opening title to the main character kind of going about her day, jumping on a train, going to school, getting through school, coming home to a pathetic mom and a out of interest dad. And just kind of thinking, okay, so right, how does that associate with itself with it? But I guess we kind you kind of think the girl is completely, bleak herself. Like, you do get to see in her room, she's got a few cutesy things a girl her age would have, like all the stuffed dolls near her window, near the window of her
She's
room.
got a bear onesie as well. Sorry, I just got to mention the weird bear onesie that she wears.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Well, I mean, knowing Japan, it's probably a Tanuki onesie. But yeah, all that kind of made me also gave me the idea that the girl is still ordinary in some way, or she has some form of affection for life, because you don't usually, if you're that bleak about life, you usually don't have an attachment to affectionate items like a onesie, or a cute onesie, or cute animals next to you. If you didn't never really had any affection for them, you'd probably just ignore them until they're worn and torn, or chuck them in some corner of your house where you never see them again. Um, and that, plus the title cards, do kind of break the monotony of the not the monotony, but the bleakness of the events happening. Because yeah,
I
what is
don't
it?
think well, she's meant to be, I think, 13 or 14. That would be my guess. So I didn't
Yeah.
necessarily think the dolls, the little bears and stuff, were necessarily completely inaccurate. I've known some girls around that age that had a couple toys and teddies and stuff around their bed still around that age. I don't think it's completely inaccurate. I do think it shows she's a little bit more childish, maybe, and a little bit more younger than
Mm.
some of the other characters around her. That's
Yeah, and
yeah,
I
that's
think
one thing I think
that,
they
that
just
would
show
be.
visually.
Yeah, that's although personally for me that would be the best way to tell her age. Whereas her personality seems to be, I don't know, it doesn't seem to fit with the items she has. Those items that make it look like she's of the age she should be.
Mm.
But she might have her attitude and the way she interacts with the worlds might come from a different factor. We can't completely blame it on, the parents, but
Mm.
it'll be. I would like to continue and see exactly how how she kind of got to this mindset, because you seem to also get a bit of an expression from her, because up to a point her expression seems to be, as you've said, a little bit airy, a bit of spacey, a bit aloof with the world around her, but then up along some point when she starts interacting with some urban legend type scenario, and I guess interacting with what all the girls in her classroom noted as a dead girl giving them messages. You do get to see some, different expressions pop up, and all these surprises, fear, and a bit of distress, even, at having to be associated with this other newfound world. So in a way, she isn't completely airy or spacey or aloof. She seems to have some of these expressions that come out at only the most appropriate of times. Of course, that would be for anyone, but with her, it is a big surprise when
Well,
it seems to be
yeah.
a 180 turn from
You could
being
also argue that she's growing up as well as the show goes on. She's maybe she is a teenager. She is gonna slowly grow up and become a different person. By experiences and the things that go on. There's definitely that. I think one aspect we haven't touched on, but we'll touch on a bit. Did you watch this with your headphones on? Were you watching this just on your TV? How were you watching this, Eric?
I was watching this on my computer. No headphones, and yeah, just
Okay.
pretty much how I would usually watch
Okay.
anything.
See, I would recommend now the best experience to watch this probably would be if you can afford it. If you have a 5.1 setup, I believe there is a 5.1 sound setup, I think, on the DVDs. I'm not too sure. I think I watched it, and I think there is a 5.1 setup for the Japanese. Maybe. Usually they don't have a 5.1 setup, so it might just be the dub. But I do think it's a show that you could definitely watch in 5.1 and have a good experience from. It'd be interesting because, as I said, there's all this great sound design and things going on, and if you could hear it in multiple speakers around you, man, that would be adding even more to the scene.
Yeah.
I'd tell you, man, if you haven't experienced watching something in not even just in a theater, just in a room, just in 5.1. I think I listened to like a Pink Floyd song a year ago for part of my course in a 5.1 setup, and it sounds amazing to hear all the different instruments go in different speakers and stuff and do all these cool little things. And I think that would be interesting to watch of this show. But I think I think that's one good way you could watch it. I think the worst way you could watch it, well, Eric, not the worst way, but I do think you might have had a bit of a better experience watching it with headphones on, to be
Hmm.
honest. I
I
think
mean,
I
yeah.
think you get in a lot. I think you get more sucked into it. I know
Mm.
watching it this time, I watched it just on my TV with the sound on, and I don't really have a massive or amazing sound setup here. It's just a regular sort of sound setup. It's okay, but I felt like I didn't get into it as much as the first time I watched this, where I think I watched 3 episodes like in a row, because the all the sounds and all the music and stuff just brought me in straight away, and I had my headphones on, so I got really absorbed and I forgot about everything else around me and just got sucked into the show. And I think that's actually the best way to watch the show. To actually, if you're watching it on your laptop in your bed with your headphones in, that's a really good way to watch the show, I've got to say.
Hmm. Definitely, yeah. This is this is definitely a show I'd want to keep watching.
Mm.
I guess in terms of cons, I can't really say I have any
Did you
cons
watch
except for
this
the ending.
in sub or yeah? Sorry, well, definitely the ending. Okay, I have got some notes on the ending.
Hmm.
So I think the ending is actually done by the guy who did the music, or it's done by someone who he might be on the guitar or something for this.
It
It's not
that
a
that's what yeah.
bad song. It's kind of a Rod
Mm,
Stewarty sort of vocally
but
sort
it
of
doesn't
song.
fit. It doesn't really fit in. It
Mm.
seems to be out of place with the episode and the
Yeah,
whole theme it was going for.
I, I thought the
Like the even
nine.
the opening.
Mm,
Like the opening song seems to fit well because
mm,
it fits with the theme, and the imagery seems to almost fit in with what we could expect.
mm-hmm.
But then the song kind of killed it for me. I was just thinking,
Yeah.
okay, so what is the point of the song? It's like it's a bit more upbeat in comparison to everything
Oh,
else.
really?
I would
Okay.
have I would have thought that'd be I would have thought there'd be a bit more. Well, not too. I was thinking there might be something a little upbeat, but not to that point.
See, I don't
Um,
I don't have a problem with the song because I think it's kind of a 90s sort of thing, in terms of the guitar and stuff, and then it's got kind of this weird sort of like Rod Stewart kind of vocals over the top.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
I wasn't. My problem with the ending is actually the same problem I have with the Hellgirl ending, where I don't mind the song, I just hate the visuals because it takes me out of the show a bit, because I think I'm watching the show. It's like this really artistic thing. It's got really good atmosphere, and then it just gives me this weird like fan servicey ending with this main character that's Sorry, can you give me one sec?
Sure.
Sorry, I thought Rick was coming in. It gives me this like fan servicey ending that just sort of doesn't really fit the show. And the characters, as she's like 14, maybe 13. So it just seemed weird to
Mm.
see like a full naked thing of her like being zoomed away on. And
Yeah, that was the weird part, but I kind of thought that would be part of the it was part of the theme, the whole thing, especially
Yeah.
with what is it? What was bordering around her as
Oh, that's
being
interesting, but it's
seems
like,
to be
well, why
shadows
does
of
she have to be? Hmm.
wiring and industrial stuff.
Yeah.
It does kind of give more of a Matrix vibe,
I
really,
would
than
have liked
anything
if she
else.
had at least worn like a
Yeah.
dress or I don't know. I just thought it was a bit like fans. I felt it felt like a fan servicey thing, like the Hellgirl ending, where I think like the
I
song
kind of
really
thought,
suits, but
yeah.
then just the visuals just like turned me off and pissed me off a little because I
Mm,
feel it's taking away from the music. And I feel like that
mm.
song could work if the visuals worked a little bit better, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of had a con about the ending song and the ending visuals.
Uh,
They don't just fit. They don't fit with each other. They also don't seem to fit with the overall theme.
I mean,
But
yeah.
the ending picture I can see, as weird as it is to see
I mean, it's
a
not as
naked girl
bad
this young.
as yeah.
Um,
I
it
could
seems I feel like with the industrial stuff that's bordering around her, it makes me feel like it almost feels like a gives off a Matrix kind of
mm,
vibe. It's like, oh, is she? Does this mean that she's stuck? That
in the
she's stuck,
pods or
technically stuck unconscious, in a dream world while surrounded by dark technology controlling her, every thought and move, and using her for fuel or something like that. I was like, is there a different story to this?
mm,
And I think that's part of yeah, I feel like that's almost one of the themes they're going for, and I do. We could almost give him a pass,
yeah.
almost. You know?
It's not the most creepy ending in terms of this fan servicey sort of thing that I'm
Hmm.
complaining about. I think well, there's a number of ones, but one that really pisses me off even more than this is the Macross ending because that feels like the way it's presented, it feels like some creepo is going through like a weird photo gallery. Yeah, that's an uncomfortable ending that I don't like. Which also has a good song. As I said, this is one where I like the song, but I don't like the visuals. But I think we've talked enough about the ending. What did you think of? Did you watch this in sub or dub?
Subbed.
Okay, I watched
Um,
this sub
'Cause
as well.
I think I watched it in dubbed with my cousin a while
Yeah.
back, but so I don't think I've ever touched this
Was
series in
sorry.
a
Can
subbed.
I just ask is your cousin Russian like you? Was this a
Half and half. He's
half and half? So he
half
can speak
Armenian, half
English.
Kiwi.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, he
So
can speak English. Yeah,
you guys
he's
didn't watch this
even
in
though
Russian.
no, we didn't. No, he yeah, he never really watches anything in Russian.
Okay.
He doesn't really like it, I don't think.
Okay. I just wanted to see if because I would be interested in what this show is like to watch in Russian. Because
Mm.
I thought the sub and the dub are both pretty meh. There's not really much for the actors to actually do. It's very low key. There's not a lot of raising the voice. Everybody's kind of talking very sort of low voice like this a lot. A lot of the female characters are kind of talking like they're on Adderall, but they're, hey there. It's a lot like this, and that would be a complaint. I would sort of say the characters later on they get to be a bit more like expressive and loud, but Lain is a very Lain is very timid, and she sort of talks like this a lot. And later on
I
when
think
she
with
yells,
yeah.
it's like no, don't do that. It's like it's very low and very So it's not bad. It suits the character, but it kind of I would say this is a hard show to watch if you are really tired. It's one of those shows like I love Mushishi, but that's a very quiet, very intimate show. And if you're extremely tired and you want something to wake you up, I would not watch this and Lane. Well, there is certainly sounds and things that'll maybe wake you up. It's not at least in the first episode, there's not a lot of action. There's not a lot of violence. It's very, well, there's a suicide, but it's very artistically done.
Mm.
Yeah, the show
Yeah,
is
if you call that artistic,
the show's very
not
slow.
exactly.
I
Yeah.
would say it's very
Yeah.
slow. It's not very fast paced, and that could be depending on your mood. It could be something that could put you off. You could see this as pretentious. There are a couple moments where it could be perceived as that. As I said, I like it. Even even if I were to take some of the visuals away, even if I think the story's not bad, but for me it's just audio, just the audio in itself is just something that I just really like about this show, as I've said. I just think, yeah, it could be perceived as that. There is one episode that I remember later on that I was really into the show, and then all of a sudden there's just this history episode that's almost just like a documentary with, I believe it's like just actual footage. Like it's I think it's like pictures and stuff, and they've got like little zoom ins and zooms out and stuff, but it's not a lot of the actual main characters doing stuff. It's just a big history. Like it's like someone just dumped their PowerPoint presentation like in one episode. And I didn't get when I watched it the first time why that was there. I'm still a little confused why it's there. I think there is, if I believe, some information in there that makes sense, but it feels like you could have had a character maybe like talk one or two sentences about it versus a whole episode which is just all that information just dumped on you. That felt a little bit pretentious and a little bit too much, and that would be probably my biggest con with this show is that episode, and some of the crudeness I've mentioned as well.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, having only remembered watching the first episode and nothing else, unfortunately, I'd say my only con at the moment is the ending. Everything else, yeah, everything else seems to be taking its time, with setting up the world and the story and even maybe developing the characters. But, I mean, sometimes we can agree that slow developments do make for a better story
I
than.
would say it's a slow burn. I just think you have to be in the mood for it. We both agree on that.
Yeah.
That you have to.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Also, if you hate Macs, this is probably not a show for you because the computers, the Navis, are Macs. And while I'm not a Mac fan myself, I've been a Windows PC master race or whatever you want to call me for a long time. I didn't
mind know that. I kind of look at those computers. Yeah, I kind of looked at the computers that Dad had and had a flashback to owning one of those, and I thought, oh, what a time that was.
Yeah.
I was like thinking, oh my God, I have had the slowest, slowest box in the world. It's like, and literally that's what it was. It was a box with a screen, and it ran quite slowly for its time, which, made sense. But I still thought to myself, oh my God, why do you exist?
I was just thinking, did we see any floppy disks? I think we might have seen floppy disk.
No, but again, going on that flashback, that might likely have been floppy disks, considering I still owned floppy disks back then.
Yeah.
What was that time? Oh, I think it was. I still had one of those computers back in 2000 and.
Well, this show's 98, if I believe, or sometime. It's late 90s.
Then in that case, I would have had one of those computers until 2009. And then 2010, I think it kind of just finally died, and I got myself a up-to-date desktop computer. It was I kind of got rid of it and gave it to my grandmother, but before that, I owned one of those for a good 5 years.
Yeah.
So those old school computers could run pretty well, but with the changing times, you just kind of have to upgrade yourself.
It's funny. This show both has like technical innovations that I don't think, although I know in Japan they might have had these innovations because they had some stuff before us back in the day, but there was stuff
for the setting, the time period is, when this came out was like 1998.
Yeah.
So, even in 1998, something like that would have still existed. So it's not too far to say.
There's some stuff she's able to do, like, well, she's technically using like I think she's like on a chat room or something in a couple episodes. There's clearly like the old school sort of chat room, which the closest thing we've got to something like that now is like Reddit. Reddit is the only thing that sort of looks like what those 90s and early 2000s chat boards used to look like. And then I believe later on,
if you want to go even darker and deeper, is 4chan.
and then later on there is a they'd be using 2chan or whatever it is in Japan.
Oh
Uh,
my god.
later on, there is an episode, I believe, where there is like a Doom, sort of an old school Duke Nukem Doom sort of 3D shooter thing. Like you know what I mean, where it's like a maze sort of thing that you're going through, like the early 3D shooters like Doom and stuff. It's like one of those sort of shooters, and we see like a visualization of that uh, within the show, which was interesting. But yeah, it's interesting because looking at the computers, there's like it's got voice activated sign in and things like that, which I think is something we had. I don't know if that was something we had back in like the 90s and the early 2000s. And we might have had that in Japan, but I certainly don't remember having that on even like our computers or even my grandma's Mac. Like little things like that seemed like that might have been technical like innovations and stuff. There's little things that are like definitely from the 90s that we don't have now, like all the did you notice like all the gifs and stuff, the things that were basically gifs, like there's like little like pants and stuff, that things that are meant to represent, like I think they're meant to be people's avatars and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. There might have been some instances of
Yeah.
that even way back then, but
I mean
I guess it wasn't
yeah
that widely used. But
the yeah
I don't know. I've never really bothered with that kind of
Well,
thing.
the biggest thing
Yeah.
you probably noticed as well with those gifts is they don't well, back in the day I think with gifts they would just be like you'd be on a chat room, and if they were like someone's avatar, they would just be on the side, sort of like flashing back and forth. This one, as we know, they just like fly at you, and I think he can like visually hear them talk at him, or like maybe a message comes up or something. It's both. It's funny. This show both is innovative with its technology, but there's also a lot of stuff that you could say like, oh, it's a little bit outdated, but it's very current, I guess you could say, for its time period. What do you think this show would be interesting now with like where we have technology now? Because I don't think Lain would even be on a computer, to be honest. I think she would just be on her phone or an iPad or something.
I think in some ways she there's potential to have both because I know kind of there might not have been a thing like Messenger way back then to kind of chat with people without paying. But
Oh no,
I
they had
know,
they had like a mess. They had like a, as we said, they had like a chat room thing back then.
well, I mean on their phones.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I can't remember ever having that kind of system on a phone. I can remember having a phone and remember seeing people chat with each other on the phone over texting and calling. Um, in terms of I guess the kind of thing involving chat rooms and computers, I would imagine something like that to exist. Because in a developing age like that, even towards the the turn of the new millennium, development like that would have kind of exploded. And the 90s is a period where even though weird things happen, there's a lot of development there. Um, and in the case of the girl being able to use a chat room, or even having to gain access to emails and just email everyone, I can see that happening.
I think she would be on Snapchat or
Yeah.
something now. To be honest, that's what I
Eh,
would see her. Yeah.
I think now we would have Instagram for that.
Oh
I
no,
think
but lots
Instagram
of
seems
lots
to
of
be a
girls
much
use
more solid.
Instagram and Snapchat. She'd be on
Yeah.
both.
Mm.
That's the interesting
All
thing
right.
now. This would be all social media. It would be
Yeah.
Facebook and Instagram and maybe Twitter. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, there'd be some interesting stuff like that. And obviously, there's things like War of Warcraft, and there's lots of games now where you can be online playing with other people, and that's sort of briefly covered here in the show. As I said, there's like a Doom type shooter thing. But we've came even beyond like the old Counter Strike days. Like there's even more online shooter. There's Fortnite and things like that. So there would be lots of new interesting things for the creators to explore. And I believe Konaka has expressed not a sequel to the show, but exploring a similar, like exploring the themes of technology again. within one of his shows. I believe he's suggested that that's something he'd be interested in doing again. Whether he can do that now is who knows. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see something like this made in our current time period with the way social media is and the way our technology is. And we talk about this the whole thing, as we said before, with technology and fiction and people being a different person online. Even more so
Mm.
now, people being a different person online, but now they're on their phone, a lot more. I mean, my phone is basically my computer at the moment, and I would say I probably use my phone more than I use my computer at the moment, just because I can pull up an app a lot faster. I can pull up the YouTube app. I don't have to go on my computer and look up YouTube or Instagram or whatever. I can just go on there and do what I need to do. So
Yeah, like nowadays compared to the time period, serial experiments, Leon, it seems to be set in, things are definitely much easier. And you are right. If the time setting for Leanne was
Lain,
more now, Lane, yeah, for Lane was now, you she'd definitely be on. She'd probably definitely be on social media. Sites like Snapchat or Instagram. And
at Lain
I
experiments or
guess,
something.
yeah, Lain experiments. As wood on play, well done. um, but I actually forgot where I was going with this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Getting a little distracted. But essentially, yeah. Sorry, I actually forgot where I was going with this. But yeah, I'll let you go,
I'll
Connor.
I'll edit around this.
Yeah, sweet. 'Cause I actually did forget where I was
Sorry,
going with this.
I
Can't
made
even
a
remember
joke and
how I
I,
started.
I got you out of your bloody mindset.
Yeah, no. Oh, no, I think I already got a little distracted. Actually, kind of forgot. Like, how did I begin my sentence
We
again? I
were we
can't
were
even
talking
remember.
about fiction and like social media, and where we think like the show would be now with that. The show was made in
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's right.
1998, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's what I was gonna say. Like, yeah, you're right. She would be on sites like that. But I guess, but I guess if we're if we do go back to the time period she's in, it's kind of hard to imagine. If we have to go back to that time period, it would be hard to imagine how people would, kind of try. It would be hard to remember how we acted,
Mm.
when we didn't have access to those kind of sites. How would we have, yeah, interacting would mean literally face-to-face interactions. We would kind of try and, show people pictures on our phones. We'd have to
Yeah,
email people and wait for them to actually eventually check their emails to look at
or
that. We'd have to,
or
yeah.
or one thing that this show doesn't touch on, but I think other shows have definitely touched on this, is like the online dating culture, which has changed dr- drastically
Whew.
from where it was back in the 90s, where it's
Yeah,
you
probably from
you
a
you
handful
you
from a
talk to
handful of
someone.
sites.
Yeah, you talk to someone
From a
on like
handful of
a
sites to a billion of them.
you talk to someone on like a chat board or something, one of those old ones, or and then
Mm.
basically you have to meet up with them somewhere later on because you don't know what they look like. And then a lot of people get catfished because they talk to someone like for 5 months. They might not even get pictures sent because it might take at least on my internet. I remember it took us a couple hours to get just a photo sometimes sent on like the old school dial-up internet. So I would imagine
Oh,
like in the 90s, man, like but and then finally, like just slowly see the image like load in. Like, yeah, a lot of people probably just like talked for 5 months and then maybe like sent a couple images through and then finally got to, really meet the person in person. And, this was early Photoshop as well. So, not that many people probably knew about like some of the things you could do. So, versus now where like you can do a lot more and there's a lot of stuff you can do, but it's pretty obvious sometimes when people have like photoshopped an image or done things and stuff, which was not quite. Yeah, it's a whole different scene now. I think Lane would maybe have a Twitch stream She'd be
Yeah.
on a Twitch stream playing Fortnite or something like that. She
Mm,
might be I don't want to picture her as a cam girl, but she might be a cam girl. Oh, Jesus.
I don't know. If trying to imagine Lain being like that is a bit hard considering her personality, but um, if she could, she probably would access these kinds of things.
Mm.
But knowing how she's a bit lackluster about technology, I would think the other way. Even if she's had access to stuff like Twitch, I wouldn't think she'd put her face
Mm.
out there to viewers to have a go with. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think she'd still be a bit. I think she'd still be a bit ignorant of
Mm.
technology and all these kinds of sites. But I wouldn't think she'd be so incompetent as to, you know, not even acknowledge their existence because she hasn't even though she doesn't realize they're talking about emails. She is aware emails exist.
Mm-hmm.
So she's not that technologically inept.
Well,
Um,
one
yeah.
interesting thing that certainly happens with the show later on is we do get to see like one thing that they do go out a lot to bars and things like that, like to discos and stuff. Which I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but there would be like, well, now it's especially interesting because we've got COVID, so a lot of people in some countries are still in lockdown. So I think Lane would be on like a Zoom thing, like a Zoom party or some sort of thing like that. If she wanted to go and experience those sort of things, because none of that's open now. It's a very interesting time we're living in, and it would be really interesting to see a show like this set within this time period, just because we've came so far with technology, and
Hmm.
we're not exactly in like a 100% cyber world, but we are a lot more online now than ever before. So that's definitely an interesting thing that this show has sort of touched on and has definitely sort of happened in the past couple of years. Yeah, I guess that's our final thoughts on Lain. We'll be right back after the break, guys. Catch you
Hmm.
after the break. Yeah. Hi guys, we're at the break right now. Guys, you may not know, but I do another podcast, not just with our great guest Eric here, but I do another podcast called Insert Cast, and we have multiple guests on that podcast where I basically interview people in the audio industry. And we're always looking for new guests. So if you know someone in the audio industry who would like to be on a podcast, please let me know. That can be a sound engineer or a musician or a voice actor or even a voice acting director. Anyone who's in the audio industry, all I ask is that they maybe have some knowledge of the audio technology. Doesn't have to be a sound desk, but maybe even just an amp, sound equipment. And if they have Skype or Zoom or some sort of way that I can talk with them. If they're outside of New Zealand, preferably, something like Skype or something like that, because I can't necessarily always do phone interviews with some of those people. So, you can email me if you know someone at insertcast.co.nz. That's insertcast.co.nz. Let's get back to the podcast. We are back from. Sorry, it's just so weird coming back from a long ass break like that. Okay, we are back from the break. How you doing, Eric?
Oh, I'm doing well. Just kind of yeah, sitting here reading a little bit of the manga. It's pretty interesting to where I'm up to,
Hmm.
and yeah, just kind of reading a bit of it and thinking, man, this is kind of interesting, and yeah, I would it's definitely a read to have a look at. But I'm assuming you'd like to introduce it to us.
So yeah, this is our manga review for this week, and I picked something. It's a long ass title, so I'm just going to say the short version of it, which is Sumito Batsu. It's a show. It's a manga about I'd say he's a very unlikable character, but he's very interesting and he's very unpredictable. And he's this hikikomori guy. Hikikomori is kind of the Japanese term for like a shut-in, and he's decided to basically go and investigate this human trafficking ring, and he sort of tries to get involved and try to stop it, and sort of goes from there. And more stuff begins to happen within this manga, and it's a very interesting manga. It's definitely a very psychological manga, and that's one of the reasons why I picked it this week, because our theme is like kind of odd psychological stuff. So yeah, Eric, what did you think of this title?
It's yeah, I the main character when reading through this, the main character does seem like a bit of a he is described as, I guess, he's portrayed as a bit of a shut-in,
You could
bit
just
of a
say
loser.
as an asshole. He's an
Yeah,
asshole.
he's a bit of an asshole. Seeing as the first few chapters we see of him, or I see of him, is him being kind of a I guess an unwilling observer,
Mm,
but
mm,
even then that's kind of that's being a bit too positive to his description. I guess as a matter of fact, he seems to be kind of lost in his own way.
mm.
He seems to have come to the big city. I'm not sure where it is. Might be Tokyo, to study, go to school, and get a good degree and get a good life. But instead, he's been
Mm.
stuck inside his own room like a shut-in, um, not doing anything, having quit school, dropped out of it. Sorry, he's essentially just stuck in the moment of things, just doing nothing and thinking about nothing. And it seems to be an opportunity's come up for him to actually do something with his life, and it's ended up being um what is it? It's just kind of ended up being as a kind of vigilante hero.
I think
But
he's I
yeah,
think what I want to make this really clear, because I think this manga is I like it, but I think it's not for everyone. I definitely will say that. And I think the problem that could be with this manga that some people might have is you could read this and interpret this as being very pro the main character, and very the message being you know there's nothing wrong with being like this, and you know he's a good guy, and he's getting out of his bed. He's going
mm,
from
mm,
I see a lot of this thing on the internet where it's like a lot of this culture of these guys who are kind of nerdy or like dweeby, like going on sites like Reddit and stuff, and they'll be like, "Oh, how can I get girls?" or that sort of thing. And these guys who people would describe as chads or something, these kind of alpha male guys who would be like, "Oh, just go to the gym every day, man. Just do this, just like, and if you did this, like you'll be, and like you just gotta talk to the." And sometimes they've been very helpful, but sometimes I do get the impression that some of these guys are just looking at people like they're objects, and they're kind of a bit abusive and Yusuf, and they're a bit like a certain character that we see that has a big impression on our character, who is kind of this really selfish, arrogant would be the best way to put it, like this
mm.
really up himself business guy who's working at his office, who may or may have not, we find out later, killed his wife. And he's this, just this arrogant, smug guy who has like a very, he has this very bad look of the world where he thinks everybody's in hell and we should just be enjoying it and doing all the worst things and stuff. And, everything's out to corrupt and all this. And that sort of for him, he's able to sort of we see this bad guy, you know, he's kind of already turned to the dark side, you could say, and since
Mm,
he's done that, he's able to just sort of be happy with it and live with it and because I think he in some ways sort of knows he's the bad guy, but he doesn't care. Our main character, I think he's in a denial phase where he's actually not a great guy, as I've said before. He's not as bad as this guy who influenced him a long time ago, who we find out later on. But he clearly does have problems, and he has a lot. Here's the biggest problem that a lot of people sometimes have, and even I've had this problem, and lots of people have this problem, where you have a lot of faults and you have problems of yourself, but you're not willing to admit them. Like maybe you are a little selfish, maybe you are a little arrogant, maybe you don't do this, but you've got such an ego and such an alpha personality that you're not willing to, no, it's not me, it's this person, and I definitely see a lot of that. There's this very selfish, arrogant personality that's really came into our main character, and we see that's a little bit through the influence of this main character that was, in his past, and maybe the absence of his dad and things like that have definitely had an effect on him, and some of the pressure from his family is definitely there. I feel like, though, as I said, I don't want to give off the impression that this guy is a nice guy and we should be sympathetic too much to the situation, because I do think he's an asshole. But I think the reason to read this manga is because he's such an asshole sometimes that he's unpredictable, and that's what makes him an interesting character. He's also very smart. What's interesting is he's a character that could get a lot of really good stuff done, and could actually be a really good guy, but his ego and his selfishness really gets in the way of a lot of the good things he could be doing.
I would agree with you. In the first few chapters, he does appear to be quite quite immature and quite childish about the world he's in. He seems to have some single idea where he could potentially be the best, but obviously something hits him, and it kind of stops him in his tracks and makes him take a 180-degree turn and realize, nope, that's not something I can do. No way in hell, no, 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 no. So these conflicting ideals do make him out to be more of a hypocrite than anything, and he's even described himself in
That's
one
a really
chapter
good way
as
of
a
putting it,
hypocrite.
actually.
He's described himself as a hypocrite, which is rather interesting, seeing as often I don't see characters describe themselves that way. They don't admit to this sort of fault. I mean, yeah, it's true. The other characters that ever had the hypocrite thing, don't always admit it to themselves, but carry that sort of trait along, like carry it on their shoulder, like it's it's that dear little angel we have, instead of listening to the devil, which appears to have more common sense. But to this guy, he understands he's a hypocrite, and he understands what he could be doing is wrong. But he'll carry on with it, because in a way it does. I wouldn't think him being an asshole is the main problem here. I think it's the problem. He's one of these deranged individuals that kind of fell down to almost rock bottom. Not there, but close. And realizing this, he's trying to climb his way out. But the climb back out seems to be taking in two directions, and he's taking the easiest yet the most lethal direction. That being, of course, the direction of a criminal. Obviously, these first few chapters don't actually, solidify that he's going to commit the crime, but it does kind of it does include.
He's trying to take a vigilante stance, and I think he's doing it for very selfish reasons. I think he justifies himself by saying, "I'm doing it to make this better." But if you read this, you do come to realize that he's actually he doesn't. He sort of cares for the girl, but he kind of doesn't at the same time. Like he has a bit of empathy for her situation, but at the same time you can tell he has like this kind of under the surface kind of like anger and angst that's there, that's kind of like, well, you should just get yourself out of this fucking situation. Like, why do I have to, there's a bit of that you can sort of sound it there. And there's a moment later on in the manga which sort of shows that, like, even after everything he's done, he still, like, is willing to, like, not really help her out at the end of the day. Like, he's not really like a pure hero or anything. He's made himself to be out this vigilante character that's helping someone, but he's not. It doesn't seem like he's doing it for the right reasons. He's doing it like, so he can say he's done something. I guess that would be the best way I could phrase it. Like, he's saying, like, well, if I do this, like, I've done something. I've went out and I've done something, and this just needs to be, like, gone. And this person's, like, worse than me. And if this person that's worse than me is gone, then I'm not as bad, clearly, like that's the way I've analyzed it when I've read this. And I've read this manga maybe like 10 times, not recently, but over the years I've read this manga 10 times, because I think it's got a very interesting commentary, like, just on its character. And then also, I think one thing it definitely touches on that Gantz and a lot of my favorite manga touch on, which is something that's very prevalent in Japan, the culture of, like, ignoring things that are going on, like bad things that are going on, because I don't want to be a burden on someone. I don't want to make a scene. I don't want to be, like, too loud or anything. And there's a scene that's really prevalent in this manga where one of the girls, basically this character is investigating this prostitution ring, and what's happened is this one girl's taking advantage of another girl, this older girl. She's taking advantage of the younger girl, and she's basically her pimp. And in one scene we see her, like, pimp her out at a well, they call it a Mick. It was called, like, a Dr. Daniels instead of a McDonald's, because they changed the M to a D. So it was like, wait, Dr. Daniels? Yeah, I noticed that when I was reading it.
I mean, I didn't notice that.
Yeah. So,
because
they basically in this Dr. Daniels, this older girl basically pimps the younger girl out to these two guys in the bathroom, and we see two businessmen, like, in the corner, and they think about, like, one of them thinks about going in and doing something, and then the other one's like, no, don't do it, man. Like, you don't want to make a scene. And that guy who looks a little bit strange over there, he might be working with them or something. There's like, you see that and you're like, that's kind of summing up the whole sort of idea that manga like this and Gantz have, where it's like, well, people are empathetic sometimes to, like, a bad situation, but how many people are actually willing to, like, help and get involved in those situations is an interesting question, I think, that this asks, and, like, Gantz asks as well, and a lot of other manga like this.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I mean, with this, with the whole series and about the guy's own mindset, to me it does look like he has taken the time to actually solidify his reasoning for what he's about to do. With with regard to, kind of with regard to how he kind of, with the reasoning he has, it seems, it is a pretty warped reasoning, especially with all the things that's happening. And in that one scene, where he's paid for he's paid to sleep with that girl prostitute.
Yeah, the young girl that's been pimped out, basically.
Yeah, the girl getting pimped out. The reasoning he's trying to even put together as to why he wants to sleep with her is a bit twisted. I mean, he's saying this stuff about sacrifice, but I'm like, so hang on, who's this sacrifice for? You or her? Well, I mean, for her, it's pretty obvious. For you, it's like, what?
Well, in this scene, he's went undercover. He's talking to this pimp about how, like, he wants to write about them and stuff, and she's like, well, if you want to write about me, you got to sleep with one of my girls. So he doesn't want to do it, but he ends up kind of having to. And it's interesting how the situation goes, because he kind of tries to give her, like, harsh love, tries to give her advice, but just like the way he does it is such an asshole like way of going about it, and it seems so selfish and so like egotistical, just in the
Mm.
way it's written and the way it's presented. Like, and this girl is clearly she's a bit like broken and a bit upset, and she's very shy, and she clearly like just needs a friend. That's really like a real good friend. Like she's
But I
really
mean, but I
yeah.
mean, it's kind of hard to have a friend with someone like that. This girl's been manipulated and used to such an extent that, as the guy described, she's less than a dog, really. She's
Mm,
getting used and trampled on so much that at this point, even calling her a dog would probably be a compliment to her, because the way things are. Her pimp, or so-called friend,
mm,
as we've been told multiple times, seems to be what is it? Does seem to be manipulating her to the point where it makes her think, "Oh, don't worry, you're my friend. You're always
mm,
gonna be my friend.
mm,
Don't worry, I'll be there for you." But it's like, great mental manipulation. Like
mm.
the girl herself, not the pimp, but the girl herself, seems to be aware of this, but also lies to herself about the whole situation,
Well,
which
I
which
think
I
we.
think yeah, which I think
Mm,
does kind of solidify, which does kind of come into question about the main character's uh, attitude towards it. Like,
mm,
is he
mm.
actually being cruel, or is his attitude justified because
I think
of
he's just selfish. I think there
mm,
really is like a
oh,
side to
that's
him that thinks she's doing the right thing.
I've got nothing against that part. Okay, I do
Mm,
think he's selfish because even now he's trying to do something for himself,
mm,
and I don't think there's that much care for this abused girl. I guess let's call it that, for this abused girl
mm,
there. And whatever he says does come up as, to me,
mm,
empathy, because, well, you say, we from the perspective of her, he seems caring. But from our perspective, we know exactly why he's doing this.
mm,
Okay,
mm.
he's not doing this for her. He's just doing this for a self-righteous reason. Um, and so, yeah, kind of looking at that. The twisted reasonings for why he could sleep with her, to why she shouldn't be considering this pimp as a friend,
Mm.
all does come down to, you're just
I
you're
think
just
he's his.
nuts.
It's funny. I think his intentions are good, but his direction, his actions are wrong. I think that's like the
Mm.
way he phrases it. Because we do see this girl like comes to trust him and like him and stuff, and there are some like problems there, but there is some like you see a little side of that sort of relationship where you sort of see like, well, he could actually go in a good direction with this. Like he's sort of earned her trust. He's like shown he can be supportive. He's tried to sort of she thinks he's trying to help her, and like the way it's going, like he could try and like get her some actual help and talk with her parents and explain what's going on. They could have both went to the cops, even in his situation, even with like some of the situations that we see in Japan. Like the cops we see in this aren't completely oblivious. Like they do ignore some of the stuff that's going on, but like if they were made aware of it, they're not the types of cops that you think would just completely ignore everything that's going on. um because this is also the pimp that we see is also working with the yakuza as well. So it's not just a small girl pimping out one girl. It's a whole pimping operation that's also working with the yakuza, which is a whole nother interesting angle that's in this manga. Yeah, it's interesting getting into this main character. I think that's definitely a
Hmm.
pro and both a con for this main
Yeah,
manga, because
the,
you
I
love
think I
him but
think
you
this
hate him at the same time.
yeah, and that's the thing. This manga doesn't make out the main character to be a hero, but at the same time, it's not going to hold back on how twisted they are when
Mm,
they're not being a hero. Some mangas, when they do try and make the main character a villain, do either, I guess the one they do make them the villain, they could make them overpowered like they do in Overlord. And
mm.
let's admit, the main character of Overlord is a
I think
villain.
that's the
Okay,
point though of Overlord. To be
yeah,
honest, I think
but
it's
I
making
mean,
fun of that.
Yeah, or other times they kind of give him a Deus Ex Machina ability that would, essentially make them all powerful and godly, like what is it, Light Yagami in Death
Mm,
Note.
hmm
With this, it's there's no superpowers. The main character is not overpowered. He hasn't got the backing of a family. He hasn't got money. He's
mm,
still close to rock bottom. All he has about him is the wit and his brain power to, you know, use what he can for his own twisted personality.
mm,
And
mm.
I think so far that's the interest I have to this manga. It's both a pro and a con for me,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
some ways.
As
So
I said before, the main character's an asshole, but he's an interesting asshole, and this story has a lot of interesting twists and turns. And as I said, I thought the main character was really smart, but I just think his own ego gets in the way of that.
mm, or whatever's left of it. I'm pretty sure this ego, like, there could be two types of ego. There's the ego from my point of view, the pimp's ego will be stronger than his. The
Mm,
pimp's
mm.
ego is, a well,
Well,
a brick house, okay, right? It's
you say that, but I think she is also a victim of abuse or something like that. We get a hint of that
yeah.
when in one scene we basically find out that in the past these two girls had met, and the way she sort of basically abused this young girl and made her hoe. That's the nicest way I could say this. Made her part of like her game. She basically found out that this young girl like was by herself with her mum. Sometimes her mum wasn't always there, so she basically like brought over a bunch of boys, and it's basically implied that like they had a gangbang or like a rape sort of thing,
Hmm.
and yeah, she basically got taken advantage of. And what's funny is we find out in the well, not what's funny, but what's interesting is we find out that this girl, this pimp, the way she talks to her, like one of the first things I believe she says something like, boys are always like that's the first time or something like that, sort of giving us a hint that maybe she's like, or boys are always a bit this rough or something like. Gives us sort of a vague hint that maybe she's like, well,
She's she's
she's
she's
been abused,
yeah, yeah,
and because
she
she's
had
been
experienced
abused,
this.
someone else has to be abused as well. That's what
Hmm.
I got from her.
So it's kind of carrying on that cycle, that
Yeah,
kind of cycle.
yeah. Which
Um,
I don't always like that in fiction because I think it's important not to. I think it is a problem sometimes for writers where they just decide that every hero or villain has to have like a dramatic backstory where they're raped or murdered or something, or had something bad done to them, so then they become that. Not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying like it. I don't think it should always be end all be all. I do have some problems sometimes with it, but I think within the context of this story, I think it's very well done and very well handled and very well written. It doesn't feel cheap, and as I said, it feels like it's really subtle too. Like I felt like it subtly picked up that that's maybe her backstory and that's what we got from her. And you mentioned that she's like a brick house. I think she's like a brick wall, but she's missing a couple bricks. You know.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I'd agree. Yeah, and I agree with you on that one. I mean, the main characters. I was making a comparison between their egos up to where I was there. Because because she's got those connections, that kind of power. She's her ego is pretty high up. She does believe nothing's gonna go wrong. Nothing's gonna
Mm,
be,
mm,
nothing's gonna go on. But with regards to him, his ego could easily topple. It could just as easily break down at any point.
mm, mm,
And you don't know where exactly his ego's up to. It
mm,
probably as low as it can be,
mm,
or it's pretty high up. Either way, his ego could shatter just as easily.
mm,
So I wouldn't say he's completely egotistical, because you don't have a guy. You don't have an he's an asshole, but he's not an asshole with a big ego. He's an asshole who's pretty lost and doesn't know what to do, and his mind's just twisting
mm,
around the fact that he's now having to try and
mhm,
get his
mhm,
life together to
mhm,
solve
mhm,
his own problem.
mhm.
Um, and in this instance, I think it might be he might be at his worst. You know, he's coming up to it,
Mm.
and right now it looks like if there's an event that's about to happen, you know, a major one,
Forget our chapter you're reading.
it could decide once and for all. It could decide once and for all which path, you know, if he's going to continue down this
Hmm.
path, you know. If he gets beaten the crap out, if he gets his ass whooped, you know, and you know, left in the gutter bleeding
Hmm.
and bruised,
Hmm.
then I think I think that would be that would count as one of the events I can see.
Hmm.
And what happens from that event is all up to him.
Hmm. So I wanted to vaguely touch on some of the cons of this manga. I think we've talked about him being an asshole, obviously, but I think one of the hardest things about him sort of not being a very nice person. I've briefly touched on the fact that I think he's a bit immature, and one thing I've definitely noticed that was hard to read, and probably my least favorite part when I read this manga is anytime his sister is involved. Not because I don't like her, more because I don't like the way he treats her and the way he talks to her. I'll admit in the past as a teenager, I sometimes lashed out at my mum. Like I didn't get violent, but I've definitely, we've had arguments and stuff, and I've maybe said some things that weren't the nicest. And I feel very bad, for that. But I've grown up, and I think we all go through a bit of that period. And I don't think this guy has sort of gone through that growth period. I think he still has a bit of a problem sometimes at lashing out, especially around his family. And I think part of him, he can't yell at his mother, but he can at his sister. And we see like we think he has a problem with his. At first, we think, oh, he's got a problem like with his sister getting married because, like, he hasn't got to meet this person, and she's only marrying him because she's like desperately needs the money. Which in some ways is nice, but when you really look at it and you think about it, you're like, actually, no. He's actually kind of even more selfish than we think because his mindset is he doesn't think that his sister can support herself and can actually like do her own thing and be her own person a little bit, and he's been very controlling,
Mm.
and like it's kind of it's hard to read in like a couple chapters because it's very real and it's very uncomfortable, and it feels like a teenager, to be honest, to me, less than like a guy who's supposed to be in his 20s. It feels very much like a teenager, like yelling at like one of his siblings, which can be, yeah, it's one of the things that I don't like, but I can admit is very well written.
Mm. Well, I can't say I'm up to any point where he's had any close interaction with his sister. It seems to be he's trying to forcibly keep himself apart from where I'm up to.
Yeah,
I guess because I guess for me from my perspective, it looks like he hasn't come to grips with
he
you know
will,
her
and
situation.
it'll be very
Yeah,
uncomfortable because it is.
yeah. But I guess at this point he seems to be just kind of
Mm.
taking a big stick and going, nope, nope, let's keep the space between us.
So yeah,
Which I guess looks like it seems to be from his point of
mm,
view a good thing. From everybody else, it seems to
mm.
be just a bad thing.
S
Um,
mm.
but I would like to see exactly how this ends up.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on just two more cons, and then I want to hear maybe Eric what some of the things you didn't maybe like in this manga.
Mm,
One thing I think maybe you'll agree with me on this because you're a bit of an artist. I didn't like the art. I don't really like the art at all, to be honest. It's kind of bland. It's kind of ugly. The only
mm,
thing I like is the eyes are sometimes really well drawn, like doing some of the
mm.
crazy, like when people are freaking out
Oh
or
yeah.
like are a bit like going crazy. The detail and like the look in the eyes is perfect. But most of the other expressions, like they're just very ugly, very like not pleasant to look at characters
hmm
sometimes.
I mean, one thing I'll give it to them is that something like the art style of locations looks pretty mean.
Mm,
I think there's one scene for a internet cafe. You know, at least the outside of it
yeah.
might not be much, but it looks pretty good.
Mm,
Whereas other parts, for the most part, this is an art style I've seen, you know, a million times before. I've
yeah.
seen it in quite a lot of other mangas. So and with it, Yeah,
Yeah,
with it, it just seems to be, quite ordinary.
I, I,
Almost nothing special.
I thought it looked kind of like a bad web comic in a couple times to me, to be honest. Like just the art looked kind of like a bad kind of web cartoon or web comic thing. Like it just didn't look very good in like a couple places. I think the main character looks okay, but there's just a couple like frames where I just don't like the way any of the characters look. The only positive I would say, like in terms of the art, is because it looks bad, it kind of almost reflects the like the harshness of the story, I guess. The visuals match like the kind of ugliness of the story, so I guess you could give it that. But I wouldn't mind like seeing this presented at a better looking version. Just personally, just I think you could do something really interesting with like a different artist. We mentioned at the start of the show the guy who does Parasite. I really like his art. It has a very it has an 80s sort of style to it, but it's got a
Mm,
very distinct. There's some very distinct things he does with the eyes and other things in his details and stuff. And I think he can draw crazy eyes and a lot of other expressions really well. And I would be interested to see like an artist like him doing the art for a manga like this, keeping the story the same, but maybe changing up the art like to make it not exactly hugely pretty, but the characters like maybe a little bit just looking a little bit more just a little bit more high. I don't want to say high tech, but you know what I mean, like looking a bit more professional. Just yeah, that's my only really sort of complaint with the art. And then one other thing I wanted to touch on, for as I said, this manga is not for everyone, and I didn't drop this manga, but there is a couple chapters later on, which are interesting, and I read, but I felt like they were just very mean and very. I've got it right here. Sorry, I'm just reading my notes here. I felt like it was very mean and just very just punishing to the viewer a little bit, and a little bit insensitive to the subject matter that they were touching on. If you've experienced any kind of assault or anything like that, there's some chapters later on in the manga that are not the best. They're interesting and they're very dark, and they tackle some things right, but there's some parts of it where it's just like you're just making this character out to be a dick, or that's just mean. Like that character could be a really nice guy, but you've just decided to make him horrible. And it's interesting, but at the same time you're like, well, I wish the author didn't do that. Like, you know, I was willing to follow this other asshole character to follow him, but like he never got to the point where like I was, being. I don't like saying I'm offended by something, but I was almost kind of offended and a little bit not repulsed, but like just uncomfortable. Definitely reading certain parts of it, almost a little bit like when I was reading Ichi the Killer, which I read a number of years ago, and I do not like that manga, but I read it because I thought it was interesting, and I will admit that the villain actually scared me a little bit, and I felt like I had to keep reading because I wanted to see this villain get his comeuppance, because he was such a interesting but also just like uncomfortable character to read about. I will say, at least of this, the exception from this and Ichi the Killer is, in Ichi the Killer, I do think that author does actually condone some of the actions that are committed in that manga. I don't think he's 100% anti some of the horrible things that have been done in that manga. This manga, though, I don't get the 100% the intention that this guy is turned on by any of these horrible things that are going on or anything like that. But they are there and they can be uncomfortable and tough read to get through. There's some good stuff afterwards, but it can be a tough read at that point to get through. So, not for everybody, and if you feel like it might make you a bit uncomfortable or offend you, it might not be for you. But yeah. What were your cons, Eric? Sorry, I've rambled for a decent amount of time.
I'd say the main character, himself. It's I can't remember the last time I've actually seen a character this twisted, but his entire psyche. I mean, I mentioned this before. His character is a pros and cons, so I'd go for it. So other than the art style, the main character himself, his
Anything
pro
else
is
like other than that?
uh, no, nothing else really. Like the art style itself is yeah, it was already explained, and the main character himself seems to be just seems to be pretty twisted. And his reasoning and his motives for everything is just, yeah, is just really out of it. Although it does seem it's interesting enough for me to try and keep going and have a read of it. I would still say his reasoning behind, say, his interaction with that girl who gets pipped out, his interaction with or his reasoning behind why she should hold herself up, and even his interaction with the pimp. These yeah, it's I can't say they're the ones helping him with his mindset, but it does leave room to try and understand where he's going to go from here. Is he going to continue on with this sort of mindset, this twisted
Eric,
understanding of what's going on, or or is he going to, it seems to be something along the lines of
what would you
someone who has no reason to be the
what would your
the
final
murder.
thoughts on this
I'd say keep going to have a read. I think it's decent enough to kind of continue to read on. Probably won't be to everyone's taste, considering how insensitive it might be in some parts, but I think it really is up to the person. But don't get your hopes up on a good main character.
Yeah.
You might just.
I think it's worth reading a couple chapters, and if it catches you, then give it a read. And you might find, I found like I didn't like it at first, but then I kept on reading, and as I said, like I found the actions and the things going on in the story so interesting that I just kept reading. And then I got to a certain point where it did get really hard to read it, and I did stop in a couple places, but I have finished this manga, and I would say, it's not an easy read, and it's not for everybody. But if you want to give it a go, like, read the first couple chapters. If it doesn't hit you, it's not gonna catch you any time soon. So yeah, that's our manga review for. Do you want to read the full title, Eric?
The full title, it was. Let me just have a double check. Tsumi to Batsu, a falsified romance.
Okay, and it's Crime and Punishment or something as well, isn't it, or something like that?
Oh, that was like the first chapter. I thought, oh hell, this is already interesting.
The title, but yeah,
that's the first chapter.
But yeah, that's our review. This has been episode 17 of Alternating with Eric. Catch you later.
Bye.